Hello and welcome to the Fairy Studio. This is my complete process of how I sculpt my hands from start to finish. And it's really long. I think it's like 15 or 16 minutes long. So if you want to hang out for the entire process, you will definitely learn a lot. A lot. If you want, you can fast forward it or just skip it. But in the meantime, should I read you some stories? You want to hear some stories? I was thinking of doing nothing and just letting you listen, but that's really boring. So maybe I'll just go ahead and use this tutorial as a way to get my stories out to you. I have a bunch of stories, tons of intro stories to my different collections. So maybe I'll just start with the first collection and just start reading. Maybe I'll do that and you guys can mute me if you don't want to listen to the story or just fast forward and skip through me. But we have to come up with 16 minutes of talking. Okay, let me see what I can find. Actually, looking through these stories, I'm not sure how far I'll get, and I really don't think I'll get that far. So I'll start with Emily's story, and Emily's story I came up with it because my little sister, who was 8, she didn't fit in at school at all, and she would often come home and tell me stories about how sad she was and how lonely she was at school, and it was really sad for me. I was newly married when she was about 8, and so for me, I just felt sad. My husband and I lived in a tiny little cabin right next to my parents' house, and so I was able to see her every day. So the story kind of developed around her. I think I created the storyline starting with her. I think she helped a lot. And I had another little sister who was a few years younger, and she's also kind of a figure in my story, just complete opposite personality type. Oh my gosh, there's a huge wasp on my wall. I'm gonna have to kill it or get rid of it or something. It's massive. Ew. Anyways, sorry, rambling. But you're just watching me sculpt hands. So what are you gonna do? You can leave or mute me. Ooh, you have the power to mute. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with this. Oh yeah, so I was designing fairies, and I always have stories going through my mind, always. So I decided to I couldn't just sculpt a fairy. It needed to have a purpose. So that's when I started building the collections, and you can't just have this is a water fairy. You kind of have to have a background or a storyline or a purpose to the fairy. So I created Emily, who was based off of my sister. So I'll read her story, and then I'll talk a little bit about it. So Emily is an only child who lives in a big old house located on the edge of Rosewood Forest. She loves to spend hours playing among the flowers in her garden and exploring the forest around her home. So how I imagine this is Emily lives in this big old white Victorian house, kind of up on a cliff overlooking the ocean. And it's actually quite sad how her home life is. Her mother is very ill. She never leaves her bedroom. And the family is quite wealthy. Her father is gone. Her father left. He's a very affluent ship's captain. That's where a lot of their wealth comes from, is his trading. And the setting is, I would say, the early 1900s. So this is more of a Victorian era. So he's on a ship, and it takes months and months for him when he goes out to sea. So mother's ill. She's 8. She has no siblings. It's just her. And her father's gone. He left because he went out on a ship. And so she's pretty much raised by her nanny. Her nanny's very old and sleeps all the time. So pretty much she hangs out with the cook. Now the cook is kind of a granny figure, more of a bubbly personality, and she she talks to the cook, but she has no friends. She's very, very lonely. So, let's see. Okay, so she loves to spend hours playing among the flowers in her garden and exploring the forest around her home. How she longed to share her great adventures. One day, Emily was sitting under her favorite pink rose, feeling so lonely she began to cry. Suddenly, she heard a fluttering sound above her right ear. Startled, she turned, and perched on a rose was a sweet-looking tiny girl. "Who are you?" gasped Emily. "Well, I'm a Florifay fairy," the tiny tinkling voice replied. "Who are you?" "I'm Emily, and you're so little, and you have wings." "Of course, silly," the Florifay fairy cried out merrily. "All fairies have wings." Emily was astonished, but she was so delighted she forgot all about being lonely. "Are you all by yourself too?" "Of course not. I have lots and lots of fairy friends. You'll be seeing them too." "How will I see them?" asked Emily, bewildered. "Come with me and meet my friends. I'll show you where they live," said the fairy. And that's how Emily from Eleanor Island discovered fairies, and they became her friends. So that's pretty much the little, tiny little story that I created. And you know what? That wasp flew away, and I don't know where it went. If I start screaming, it's because it's biting me or stinging me. It's big. It's like an inch long at least. Okay. Anyways, I'm like looking around in my studio. All right. So Emily goes to school, but she doesn't fit in. She doesn't fit in because she's rich. So she doesn't fit in with the small children in the little fishing village. And they make fun of her, and they stop outside of her, the curve of her road going up, because she has to walk the long hill home, and they throw rocks at her and stuff. It's really terrible. It's actually a really terrible childhood. And I don't know why I made it up. I think it's because of my sister, and it was the loneliness that she kind of portrayed. Even though my sister had family around her, she just did not fit in. So there's Emily, and she meets these fairies. And I guess obviously any person could turn this into a creepy story. Like you meet creatures and they take you out into the forest. But it's not. It's an innocent story, and it was made 20 years ago when I was really young. And life was very innocent for me back then. I was raised very sheltered, and we didn't have TV or anything. So that I wasn't influenced by, a lot of things that were around me. I was just influenced by the books I read. And the trees and being in the forest. And so I love nature, and so that's my story is very innocent. Now Rebecca's story. Rebecca is totally different. Okay, so Emily goes into the forest. She meets the tree pixies. Those are what she meets first. They show her their little home and stuff, and it's super cute and fun. Cute. She lives on Eleanor Island and innocent. Now Rebecca is a little bit different. Rebecca was a little girl who was raised in the fishing village in a very, very poor family who could not afford to keep her. So Rebecca, so with the storyline that I created a good storyline, and then I created the evil to balance out the good, because you always have to have a good and a bad to create a good story. And I didn't want the story to be very evil. I didn't want it to be, I wanted it to still keep its innocence in a way. So what happened is there's two sisters. There's the two fairy sisters, basically twins. And in the dungeon of the fairy castle, they discovered a book. And it was kind of like the book of good and evil, like the generic good and evil story. Well, one sister chose evil and the other sister chose good, and so it kind of split them apart. So it's kind of sad because the evil queen is under basically a spell, and she's acting very evil, very, very evil, under the guise of this spell that needs to be lifted. So once the spell is lifted, then everything can return to its harmony and goodness and pureness and all the good stuff. So that's kind of the underlying story. So Eleanor Island, if you'll notice in my collections, I'll label them where they're located. There's Eleanor Island and there's Aranel Island. And Aranel is the evil queen, or the evil fairy sister's island. There was battle, I guess, between good and evil, and she was cast off of the island. And so she went out and saw this other island. The islands are close enough you can see the edge, kind of the mountain range of one when you're standing on the shoreline, so you can see them just way off in the distance. So they're close enough to be seen by the human or fairy sight. So she was pushed out, cast out of the island, and that's where the evil queen lives, on Aranel Island. So you'll notice some of my categories are Aranel Island, and those are the fairies that live under the evil queen's influence. So some of them are evil. They're under the evil spell, basically. And other fairies are there that have been kidnapped. They have a particular fairy collection called the Swamp Hanky, and they go out to the Good Fairy Island and they kidnap fairies and bring them back. So it's kind of a complicated storyline, and I don't even have it written down. I don't think it's just in my mind. I need to write it down. But so there's Eleanor Island, which is good, and there's Aranel Island, which is bad. And it's actually, Aranel is just Eleanor flipped backwards. So it's like a kind of a play on the name. So Rebecca is different. So Emily basically lives on the Good Fairy Island. She talks to the Fairy Queen. She's friends with everyone. Sad home life, but happy with the fairies. Emily, okay, so let me read you Rebecca's story. And her story is actually really sad. She's an 8-year-old as well, I believe. I don't know. I haven't read it in such a long time. Okay, yeah. So here's Rebecca's story. And I haven't read this in years. So this is the first time I'm reading it in like 20 years. All right, here we go. Rebecca O'Donnell was born into a poor peasant family on a cold, rainy day. The family is large, and the small fishing cottage was crowded and cramped. Her mother looked at her father and nodded wordlessly, tears pooling in her eyes. Silently, with a heavy heart, her father took her into the rosewood forest and left her wrapped in a small blanket, laying on a mound of soft green moss. Rebecca looked around with her large brown eyes and cried. The cry echoed in the still forest, and a gentle fae raised her head. Flying swiftly to the small baby, she gasped with delight and stroked the soft, downy cheek. I feel like, wait, hold on, because this is on a piece of paper that didn't. Okay, all right, let me take you back. Sorry, I was checking. Okay, so flying swiftly to the small baby, the gentle fae, right? She gasped with delight and stroked the soft, downy cheek. After much consideration, the fairy council agreed to adopt the baby into the Baron royal family. Why am I leaving out so much information? All right, so I guess I have to give a backstory on this because it's not going to make sense. There's 7 wise grandmilas. Okay, interesting. All right, so the Fairy Queen was barren. She could not have children, and I don't know why. I haven't written that part of the story. So she always longed to have a baby. So, okay, after much consideration, the Fairy Council agreed to adopt the baby into the Baron royal family. There was concern about the size of the baby, as she was much too large to fit into any of the palace's tiny rooms. The 7 wise grandmilas used their conjoined powers to resize the baby into a more comfortable fit, the size of a newborn fairy. Happily, the queen embraced the human baby and held her to her breast. "From now on, you will be known as Rebecca, Eloria, Elandria, Ellenfae," she cried out, her tinkling voice carrying throughout the palace and ringing out across the land. From fairy villages to bustling cities, all creatures heard her voice and paused to pay homage. A wonderful miracle had taken place. The queen now had an heir. Rebecca was raised in a happy family, filled to bursting with dancing, laughter, and merrymaking of all sorts. Every day was a new day to celebrate the miracle of life and the beauty of nature. She grew quickly and was taught all sorts of marvelous things. Her one regret was her lack of wings, which her mother assured her would be granted when she inherited the throne. Rebecca's happy life ground to a halt on the day of her 8th birthday in the midst of celebration and feasting. It ground to a halt on the day of her 8th birthday in the midst of celebration and feasting. And my thing is about to run out. I might not have time to finish this. A treasure hunt was offered as part of the entertainment, and happily Rebecca raced across the forest floor, laughing as she collected beautiful feathers, sparkling stones, and flowers of all sorts. Abruptly, she was grabbed, thrown into a sack, and magically transported to a dark island of Arenau. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and end it here.